Good evening. The Stratford Zoning Commission is now open for public hearing for those petitions advertised to be heard at in this session. We have a full regular board this evening. I wish to announce that should any items on tonight's agenda take more time than anticipated, this public hearing may conclude at 11 p.m. and be continued to another date, which will be established at that time. Any items not heard by 11 p.m. tonight will be heard at the continued public hearing. For the record, petitions to be heard this evening were advertised in the Connecticut Post on April 11th and April 18th. The properties were duly posted on April 22nd. Ms. Phillips, if you would read the first petition, please.
This looks to be a continued item, a text amendment. The petition of the Stratford Zoning Commission seeking to amend the zoning regulations by adding professional, business, and medical offices as permitted use in a CA zone.
Mr. Urbanski.
Okay, thank you, Commission. Again, I'll be brief. This is just a text amendment to help make the zoning regulations a bit more understandable. There was some ambiguity as to whether or not offices were permitted in the CA zone, although historically they've always been considered permitted use. So we wanted to take some of that unclarity out of the regulations and just make it much easier to interpret. The only reason we kept this public hearing open was so that we could get the recommendation from the Planning Commission. On April 16th, the Planning Commission gave a favorable recommendation, with their reason being the proposed text amendment is consistent with the Town of Stratford's 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development. I would recommend, as I stated in my staff comments, that we attach 2 conditions to this approval. One being that the approved text amendment shall become effective once the decision has been noticed and after the 15-day appeal period expires. And 2, that the reason for the decision is that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the Town of Stratford's 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development. That's all I have. If you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Urbanski? No? Anybody here to speak in favor of this? Anyone in favor? Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, motion to close. Motion to close by Ms. Phillips, second by Mr. Solhavy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Mr. Solhavy, if we could read item number 2, please.
Item number 2, 3226 Main Street, petition of 3226 Main Street LLC, seeking special case and site plan approval to construct a 2,297 square foot addition to establish a dental office in a CF zone.
I'm guessing you're the petitioner?
Yes.
If you want to just step up to the microphone when you get there, just state your name and for the record.
My name is Sham Desai, and this is the architect I'm working with. S-H-Y-A-M as in Mike, last name Desai, D as in Dave, E-S-A-I.
Dr. Desai is the property owner, and I'm with Rose T-Zone Company, 35 Brentwood Avenue, Fairfield, Connecticut. We are proposing a addition. Here on our survey plan is the existing site and building. It was currently used as a bank with a drive-through teller. Sure. I'm just. This is the proposed site plan where we will remove the teller drive-through and remove the drive-through on Main Street. And we are proposing, the 2,297 square foot addition to the existing building. We propose to use the existing utilities as far as the catch basin, electrical utilities, and incoming water. This is the current floor plan showing what we plan to demo out. This is the drive-through area, which we plan on removing. Also with the window and any fixtures within the building. This is our proposed floor plan where CT Braces intends to move into this area along here. And we're proposing two proposed separated tenants with their own restrooms. For our addition, we would like to continue, as far as the exterior, we would like to maintain the uniform look and construct the addition with brick to match existing. And we also intend to take out the existing windows and provide new storefront windows. That is our presentation.
So you plan on sealing off the exit and entrance that is on Main Street completely?
Yes. And the only entrance and exit would be on Bear
Street. Any questions? Sure.
Thank you, Chairman.
She said she was done.
I know. I got quite a few of that. You'll probably hear some repetitive ones.
No problem.
I have grave concerns with you closing off that entrance on Main Street and only leaving one entrance to access the properties, in the back. Mm-hmm. All right. Number two, I know you say you had some tenants planned for the other two sections. Mm-hmm. We don't have a clear idea of who they might be, what they might be, what kind of parking needs they might need. Something that would tell us a little bit more about it. And I can start with those two. I know that there's a bunch more, but those are like the big highlights.
Yeah, we noticed that Main Street was a really busy street to add traffic, or it's an existing route.
Right.
But we thought it would be safer for the cars to come in and out of the parking lot. We are decreasing the impervious area, so we're going to have more grass along the front.
But people live on Bear Street. I don't know how happy they are about having more traffic being directed down Bear Street. There are several homes that are on there.
The good part is because we're right on the corner. We're not too far in the street.
And if it was being used currently as a bank, the drive-through is only an exit, so that everyone going in would have to go through Bear's Place anyways. So essentially, we would be removing the exit.
And the other businesses there don't have a problem?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
The other question with the tenants, since there is the space, that drive-through space, I don't have any planned tenants that are going to occupy it. It's just space that would be available. And then I know there was concern about it fitting into the zone, and we'd certainly go by any requirements that you had to fill the space.
I think that, and I'm going to leave it to ask our administrator, but it's kind of hard to figure out your parking needs when we don't know what's going in there.
I would love to have tenants filling that space right now. That'd be great.
We're going in with the intent that we're trying to get medical business tenants within the 2 spaces for we know we have the required parking spaces on site.
And I will say Marie and I worked on plans for me using this space, but since we completed those plans, I'm considering also using this part of the space. So, I don't have plans for these tenants, and that's the best that, if you have requirements, and obviously if they don't fit within the parking requirements, then I can't bring them in. And that's something that I would have to, understand.
In other words, you're looking at office space, you're willing to restrict it to an office space tenant, and it won't become a restaurant or something else that will have a high traffic
Correct.
kind of environment.
It's a pretty good sized parking lot, but as an orthodontic office, when we're seeing patients, we have the employees that need parking and the patients that are coming. So we also do not want a tenant there that's going to put a high demand on the space as well.
That's shared parking, so you're sharing that parking with other tenants, and I need to let them move on, but do you know what your parking needs are?
At this square footage of the existing and proposed, we're required 29 minimum, and we propose 30 parking spaces on our site plan.
You propose 30 where? New ones?
Total.
So we reconfigured the parking along the curb along here. We would have to do some, if it's approved, we would need to provide new curbing. And with the proposed project, we need 29 parking spaces, and we're able to fit 30 within the site.
I have some concerns, but I'm willing to yield and let the other commissioners speak.
Mr. Henrik?
So you had said your elevations and your floor plan show entrances on Main Street, am I?
As far as car travel,
Not for cars, but for pedestrian?
for pedestrians, yes.
So you will have doors on the Main Street side?
Yes.
Okay. And now currently, the only entrance into that property is on Beer Street, so you're not changing the location of it?
Correct.
There's only an entrance on Bear Street.
And that's the existing entrance, so you're continuing
Yes.
to use that. And as you stated, the only way out onto Main Street would be if you went through the drive-through, currently. So you're just, and I've been to that
Well,
bank.
I guess only the drive-through people will be going that way. The other people who are going into the bank would probably,
Come in from Beer Street, yeah, when you're exiting, if you're exiting, my recollection is if you were exiting, you would need to go through the drive-through first to exit out onto Main Street. You couldn't leave the parking lot without going through the drive-through.
you could go back out of Bear Street.
There were one entrance,
Yeah,
which is on Bear Street,
yeah,
and there's 2 exits. You were able to leave on Bear Street or Main Street.
right, but the Main Street one when it was a bank,
When it was a bank, yes.
the only way to get to Main Street was to drive through the drive-through. Yeah, okay. So it wasn't an actual full-time used exit? It was only for people who had
Right.
accessed the drive-through and were exiting through there? Correct? No, that was my recollection. So as far as the spaces, I was reading our administrator's comments that if you did, I know it as the doctor, I think? You're the dentist?
The orthodontist, yeah.
As the doctor had said, that he'd love to rent the space.
Right.
Based on his, and in a perfect world it would be, but based on the comments here, if it was to be used as anything besides a medical facility, that you would need to come back before us as a special case. So we, we're assuming, if we were to approve this, our assumption would be that you're going to use it as a medical facility or medical space in tenants A and B. But if you used it for anything else, you would need to come before us, and then we would have to look at, does that require different parking requirements? Based on, if it was a restaurant, say, for instance, you would need to come back before us, and we would have to look at a whole bunch of different criteria. But if we approve this today or whenever, then it's being approved based on the criteria of parking spaces for a medical facility.
Understood.
Yep, okay. All right. And is there any, as far as landscaping or something along those lines, are you doing anything on the front? I see you have some.
We did want to remove the driveway area in the front, because we don't want any confusions, because the site is going to change.
Yeah.
So we intended to, we wanted to extend the grass area for, he could have a full length grass.
Okay.
For the front of the building.
Okay. Okay. And the exterior, the facade, you're going to continue with the brick? Yeah, so it'll just be a continuation or a similarity to what is already there?
Right.
Okay.
The only slight structural difference is, we have a couple of pitched roofs for the existing building. Our proposed building, we have more of a slight parapet.
Okay.
That would be continuous all the way around, unless we needed a roof access. And we propose I think when we get further into construction, that would be more of a flat roof versus the pitch roofs that we have on the existing building.
And why is that?
I believe we, just trying to think down the line, we want to put our AC units above there. Currently, the mechanicals within the existing building are like within the roof, and, within the pitches above the ceiling. So we want to give our design, a place for our mechanicals. The AC system.
Would it, and I don't know if it's even feasible, but, would it make sense, or would it be possible to put some type of a gabled but a pitched roof facade in the front to kind of get a continued, so that the aesthetics aren't changed? Yeah, I mean, with the brick, it's kind of a colonial-ish, old style. Maybe dress it out a little bit, or
Yeah, I think the current roof is a slate material. I'm not too familiar with it, but from what I hear, it's not the easiest to renovate. Or I guess if I was going to make it match, then I would have to have a new slate roof kind of put on the new addition, and I'm trying to avoid putting a slate roof on.
Is it your intention to leave the slate that's currently there, or you're going to?
Yeah, if there's no issues with it, I would leave it.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Solhavy?
Yeah, not so much questions, but just to emphasize some of the points Commissioner Henrik made. I think it's a fairly tight location. So there's especially if you're cutting off the drive-through, now it just becomes that small parking lot. And the building is actually, it's actually a very nice looking building. I mean, it's a little overgrown now since it hasn't been the Chase Bank, or I think it actually goes back to City Trust way back in years and years ago. but it's been a sort of a well-known building for a while. People recognize it because it's on Main Street, and it's very got a distinct look to it. So anything that you can do to mitigate the, I don't want to criticize your architect, but I don't like that look of like two buildings glued together. So if you can, anything that you can do to improve that, I think would be an improvement. I actually think the keeping the traffic on Beers Place is actually a good idea, because they've just been reconfiguring the traffic lights in that area. I'm also going to be assuming that a number of your clients are probably on the younger side, since it's an orthodontic practice. It's probably a good thing for, if they're being dropped off and picked up, that there's less access to the main street. So that doesn't particularly worry me. Seems like a pretty good proposal. I know obviously you'll resolve the situation with the tenants. That area there has been very consistently for medical purposes. The building next to it is all medical right now. It actually was prior to the construction of that. The previous building there was where my orthodontist was way back years and years ago. So that's consistent with the way that has been used there. But again, all I'm just saying is that considering that's in our main street of town in a prominent intersection, well-known, and a well-known building, anything you can do to maintain that, I think, would be very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just for the record, since this gentleman has purchased the property, he has kept it clean, because it was a constant problem all last summer. But he gave me his word that he was going to keep it clean, and he has. What was it, back in July or August you bought it?
After the transition, things happened quick, and we talked. And,
somewhere in August,
I made
September.
sure I took care of it the way it needed to be taken care of.
Mr. Henrik?
Just looking at that, and I don't know if maybe even just a reverse gable on the front to instead of the parapet wall, just having a reverse gable and just having it as a facade, so the roofing that would go on it maybe 2 feet deep, so now you don't have to bear the expense of an entire slate roof that fronted towards Main Street, but just maybe do like a 2-foot gable type parapet wall that gives you the front facade of a gable and a gabled roof going back. Do you understand what I'm saying?
As long as she understands.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But then that allows you to have the flat roof behind it. But the front, the Main Street front, is. Yeah. 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 But that would kind of, I think, tie it in. I have to see it, but maybe we tie it in and maintain that aesthetic and keep the cost down for you, because I know slate roof is out of reach for most.
Yeah.
Ms. Phillips?
Just a quick question. Have you thought about putting solar to help offset some of the cost?
It's definitely a consideration. That's one of the things that I'll look into once, at least this part of the plan gets approved. I just recently put solar at my Bridgeport location, so we're about a month into it being turned on. So it's something I'll look into for sure. No.
Oh.
Well, in the Bridgeport office, it's on Main Street in Bridgeport, but you can't see it because it's a flat roof. You can't see any of the solar from there. But yes, no, I won't put it on the slate roof. I don't think you could install it.
I don't think you can put it on the slate roof. But it is something that, even with reverse gable or such, if you were to look at it, it might help offset some of the improvements that you're asking for to keep that sort of authentic look of this small town. As such. I feel better about the parking a little bit more, that I've listened a bit more, so I have a better feel of that. And maybe we might put a stipulation in there. But I think either way, you have to come back for those other 2 tenants. Is that correct? Not if it's a medical? Yeah, I'm asking the question.
Can you repeat the question?
They have 2 open spots for tenants. Do they have to come back if it's anything other than medical, or unless there has to be a stipulation?
No, if they stay medical in the same classification of medical, where the parking calculation is the same, then no, they don't. If they go outside of this parking classification, or if that changes or the use changes, then they would have to come back for a special case for each use, potentially.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Anybody here who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone in favor? Anyone in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Richard Hayes. Hayes is spelled Hayes, so it doesn't confuse with other things like Haze, etc. My address is 40 Beers Place, Stratford, Connecticut, 06614 is the zip code. My property happens to be immediately adjacent to the parking lot at 3226 Main Street. I'm here to speak against this petition as presented. The continued expansion of commercial property has a negative impact on my adjacent residential property. This expansion brings with it all the traffic, noise, dust, and congestion that interferes with my right to live peacefully in my own home. This petition lacks information specifically what are the unknown tenants and what are they going to bring to this property that will impact my property in terms of traffic, noise, dust, congestion, that interferes with my right to live peacefully in my own home. How many patient stations are there going to be? As that will drive the amount of traffic in and out of the parking lot. The first letter I received indicated some areas of the property would be used for passive recreation. What does passive recreational use mean? That could be anything. Approving this petition is like issuing a blank check to do anything the petitioner wants to do. My property is currently bordered to the north by commercial property, the west by commercial property, and of course, Bears Place to the south in their configurations. I do not need additional commercial property next to my property. I would expect it is understood that location, location, location helps to sell property. Residential property bordered by commercial property does not jump out at me as prime location, 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 which suggests to me that when the time comes for me or my heirs to sell my property, it'll be impacted financially in a negative way. This petition eliminates the driveways on the north side of the current building. This petition demands that all traffic enter and exit the parking lot to and from Beers Place. I would encourage the Commission to study the newly configured traffic light pattern at Beers Place to Main Street, North Avenue, and Main Street. Briefly, attempting to exit Beers Place to turn left or south onto Main Street, you encounter southbound traffic that has drifted past the Stop Here sign that is posted on Main Street because the light now has moved from Beers Place to North Avenue. If you can make the turn south on Main Street, you immediately encounter a red light, which I've noticed has caused some major configuration, or some confusion, I should say. The reality is the first car out of Beers Place may be able to make it out. The second car has no place to go. If the second car tries to follow the first, it may end up in a northbound lane of Main Street, blocking the traffic coming off of North Avenue, attempting to turn north on Main Street. Further, you can no longer turn right or north on red lights exiting Beers Place, because there's now no turn on red light, or no turn on red sign, I should say, which will add additional traffic back up on Beers Place. The new traffic light configuration cycle is about 2 minutes. During the day, add in the crosswalk lights, the cycle time gets longer. Add in the emergency vehicles that are frequently called to St. Vincent's Medical Center at 3272 Main Street, which is immediately next to 3226 Main Street, as well as places north of the medical center. The time to get out of Bears Place is extended. If you were to estimate just 10% of the cars from the planned 30 parking spaces and 10% of my low estimate of 50 cars from Beers Place, you would expect significant delays exiting Beers Place. In my opinion, this traffic pattern is going to create a potentially dangerous condition as it generates confusion regarding the red light you encounter on Main Street at North Avenue, which is immediately when you attempt to turn left or go south. Just reading from an article, The Effects of Commercial Property on Residential Property. Although a myriad of factors can affect housing prices, it is commonly held assumption that the presence of commercial property or the promise of future commercial development can significantly impact the value of nearby homes. One of the biggest concerns that homeowners have when commercial developers begin purchasing lots of land close to them is whether or not the project's planned will significantly increase the amount of vehicle traffic in the area, a sure way to hurt property values and reduce buyer interest. In addition to that, I have a photograph that was taken March 26, 2019, which is a typical maintenance activity in any kind of a commercial property. Basically, it shows debris being blown from commercial property towards my residential property, which I then have to clean up in my area. What I would like to do is submit my comments, the article on the commercial versus the residential pictures, and the 2 letters I received from the petitioner, if I may. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Linda Hayes-Lucian. I belong to him. I am no longer a resident of Stratford. However, I'm my dad's executor and I'm responsible for things going down the line at some point in time. I'm so glad that someone updated Beers Street to Beers Place, because it is in fact Beers Place. It's a dead-end street with approximately, I would say, maybe 50 houses or so, that the end stops at Longbrook Park. It's a lovely, lovely street, wonderful street. Hope you all come to visit it and see now that my dad is pretty much getting closed in by all these commercial properties. I know Dr. Desai. He's a wonderful man. I was so excited to hear that he was going to be my dad's neighbor. I know he's going to be a great neighbor. A couple of the concerns, though, is the unknown tenants. And the traffic pattern is a big concern. Just to clarify, the current exit onto Main Street, you do not only go through the drive-through. You can go either through the drive-through or around the where the ATM would be on the outside. So there are 2 exits currently going on out of the parking lot, one onto Main Street, which is a right turn only exit, and then one onto Beers Place. And as my dad mentioned, with the traffic light, I think someone else brought up the traffic light changes here. We're not sure how that's going to be impacting, but imagine, and my expertise is also in dental. I'm a dental hygienist. That's how I know Dr. Desai. But I'd like to know how many operatories are planned and how many days the office will be opened, because an average orthodontist office will probably see, maybe in the afternoons when you're doing maintenance and band changes and things like that, you might see like 3 patients an hour per chair. And if there's more than 3 chairs, that's maybe 9 patients. And you are talking dropping off and picking up of those patients, then possibly other maintenance patients that would be there longer, and or the other tenants. So you're probably looking at potentially maybe 12 cars an hour in and out of that one space. And granted, this is a bank. Before, that was my grandfather's house, actually, before it was the City Trust Bank. So yes, there has been traffic there for years. But again, that stops at 3 banking hours, so to speak. So it's just going to be the impact of the flow of traffic coming out of the parking lot onto Beers Place to the new light system, which doesn't seem to be quite finished yet, it seems. I don't know if the trip is activated yet. It used to be a trip activated light, and then it went to Main Street, North Ave, Beers Place, and now I think it might be trip activated, but we're just concerned about the impact for traffic, people getting out of their homes and onto Main Street. Thanks.
Your name again, please.
Sure. Linda Hayes-Lucian. It's a hyphenated, Hayes hyphen Lutin.
Just one additional thing, that Beers Place is a dead-end street. The only way out of it is to Main Street. Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? Okay. I'd like to offer you a chance to rebut anything that they had said. I don't know if you want to correct anything or try to...
Thank you for your comments. I'm not familiar with the past history of the surrounding area of his property, but I do plan on using the property as respectfully as possible. I have other locations, and I don't have issues with any of my neighbors, so I expect that it'll be the same situation here. He mentioned a letter where it said there was going to be some recreational use. I'm not sure I am aware of that letter, but if I can see that letter, I can definitely respond to the comments that are in that letter. And lastly, what was the other? Chairs hours. So right now, we're open about 2 days a week. So I have an office in Stratford currently. It's closer to the train station. And we're open about 2 days a week. We have I would say we have 6 chairs in the open bay area with another chair where we scan patients who are interested in like Invisalign or some non-braces type of treatment. The hours when we see patients, it'll either be from 8 to 5 or 9 to 6, depending on the day. We're not the hours are not as short as bank hours because kids want to come to us after school. Unfortunately, I can't close it. I would love to be able to close at 3 and stay busy, but kids want to be able to bring their kids to us after they're done with school, so we have to have those hours available for them. Yeah.
Is it absolutely necessary to remove that right-only exit onto Main Street? Do we know if it's causing problems? I'm just asking very innocently if there's any way that makes sense that so much traffic isn't forced onto Bear.
Yeah, and with the new traffic light, honestly, I haven't even driven past and through that traffic light, so I don't know how that's impacting the current traffic pattern. So yeah, it's hard for me to comment on that, but I think...
Our thought behind that was to improve the facade of the front of the building in order to take away the curbing and the pavement and to soften it up a little bit more.
But which I agree with wholeheartedly, that's something I'm particularly interested in. I'm just wondering, and it doesn't sound like a lot of traffic, but would it have any benefit to direct some of the right turn only, which is the northbound traffic, to have that exit, even a very tight exit out, so that it's not all reliant on
We would
Beers?
have to reconfigure the parking because due to closing off that driveway and continuing the curb, we lined up additional parking
That was where some of
spaces.
your parking spaces came from. Got it. Okay, that was all.
Thank you.
I guess they're done. Okay, motion to close this. Motion by Mr. Henricks, second by Mr. Vacola. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? And we have a public hearing on nothing on the, okay. All right. Motion to close the public hearing at this point by Ms. Phillips, second by Mr. Vacola. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? So moved. And we'll go right into the administrative portion of our meeting. Item number 1 is 540 Longbrook Avenue. You need that read, or you gonna?
We're gonna go back to the text amendment.
Okay, we're gonna go back.
And then we'll handle that one when it comes up to it.
Okay. The text amendment first. Mr. Bansky.
Mr. Chairman, motion to take text amendment, Stratford Zoning Commission, amend the zoning regulations by adding professional business medical office as a permitted use in CA zones off the table.
Motion by Mr. Henrik, second by Mr. Solhavy. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? So moved. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Henrik.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the text amendment change.
We have a motion by Mr. Henrik. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Solhavy. Any discussion on the matter?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Henrik.
Based on the comments from our administrator, Mr. Hibansky, the fact that it adheres to our 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development, I would make a motion, but I'd like to make it effective on the notice date and after 15 days of the expiration. Can you clarify, am I saying that right?
Sure. Would be that the text amendment shall become effective once the decision has been noticed and after the 15-day appeal period expires.
I'd like my approval to include that.
So moved. Do you accept that, Mr. Solhavy? Okay. Any other discussion on the matter?
And the fact that the Planning Commission has also given it a favorable recommendation.
Okay, so noted.
I think anything that we do to clarify our regulations and make sure that it's clear what the intent is and how they're being applied, I think is good. So I thank the administrator for bringing this to our attention and moving it through the process. So I urge adoption.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved, 5-0. Mr. Henrik.
Motion to take 3226 Main Street, special case and site plan review, approval to construct a 2,297 square foot addition to establish a dental office in the CF zone, off the table.
Motion by Mr. Henrik. Do I have a second? By Mr. Solhavy. Any discussion on the matter? I personally think that
Just taking it off the table.
Oh, you're just taking it? Okay, sorry.
No discussion.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? So moved. Mr. Henrik.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve 3226 Main Street.
Motion by Mr. Henrik. Do I have a second? Mr. Solhavy. Now under discussion.
Do you want to go ahead?
I believe closing down, as Mr. Urbanski had brought to my attention, closing down the entrance and the exit portion of coming out of Main Street would be much safer for exiting the property, forcing it out onto Bear's Place, making them use the traffic light. You know, you'd be coming out of that parking lot, you know, free range, and half the time people are not really paying attention. They would just be going on their own instead of being directed by a traffic light. So I'd be in favor of closing that completely. Any other, Mr. Henrik?
Yeah, I mean, so we've asked the applicant to change the facade from what they have here to include, you know, perhaps something to make it more, I don't know, historically correct or in tune with the current theme of the building, whether it be a, you know, turn gable or something of that nature. But I think it's a good use. It stays within the property setbacks, or no variances being required. They meet our parking regulations. If they do go beyond that, if they try to use it for a different use, they will have to come back before us. I understand the residents' concern in the neighborhood. It is a commercial street, though, and you are staying within the parameters of the property and not expanding it. So I don't think you're trying to overdevelop it. You know, I think some of the garbage or whatever it might be that's blown away doesn't come perhaps from your, probably from some of the neighboring properties, the residents even. But I think that you've done a good job, and I think that the lighting, the new lighting that'll be placed there, which they're in the process of working through, and I think, if I remember correctly, Beer's Place has its own light coming out of there, so that'll control the traffic flow and allow it to move in a safe fashion and reduce the congestion there as much. The only thing that I would ask is that you would obtain a letter, and I don't know if I need to make a motion to do this, or just make it a requirement that you would need to obtain a letter from a licensed engineer ensuring the project's compliance with the Town of Stratford's MS4 stormwater permit, and the letter should be delivered or emailed to the Office of the Planning and Zoning and kept in the applicant's special case file. But I think it's a good use for the property. It is a commercial property, and again, I don't think you're overdeveloping it. And we do have medical facilities, you know, the one right up the road, and I think they've been good neighbors. And as a medical facility, I think the traffic flow is minimal. I know when I go to my dentist, you know, he's got a pretty big office, and the people in the waiting room are typically minimal. They move them out pretty quickly, so there's not a big need for large. He's got a huge parking space, but there's not a big need for it because they keep the people coming and going. It's not like a doctor's office where you're sitting there an hour and a half waiting to see the guy. You have people lined up a mile long. So, but I think it's a good plan, and I think it'll be a good fit for the neighborhood.
Ms. Phillips?
It is a commercial property, and I feel for the neighbor because you are being sort of encroached upon as Main Street develops with our economic development. But it's been an eyesore to see that property uninhabited as we wait for someone responsible to occupy it, keep it clean, make it aesthetically nice. I just wanted to say to the neighbor that your property values would be worse, actually, if the property goes into disrepair. And having a medical office and somebody who's responsible is probably the best that you might see in the world of development. There are other things that could have happened. It could have been housing or something else. This is the least intrusive that I know of from being on this board that could happen. Now, having a responsible owner who owns the property, who is a medical office, is the least intrusive that I can think of. As long as they come back for anything other than the use of those tenants, I think that is fine. I'm very happy to see that property developed nicely, not overdeveloped, but as Mr. Hendricks pointed out, the aesthetics of that, it is Main Street, are very important to us. And the upkeep of the greenery area. I did like your idea of the greenery area. That was one of the nice things that I liked, is to have more green, a softer look. It is Main Street. And I think it makes the other properties near it and adjacent to it even more enhanced. So that's just my thought on it. I'm just glad to see that there's a responsible owner that's coming forward.
Mr. Solhavy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've said most of my feelings during the initial debate. So again, just I agree with the position of keeping the traffic on Beers Place for safety reasons. I'm not sure where those other spaces are going to go, but I think it is very much limited by the amount of parking that you're going to be there. So I think it's probably more of an office use. The hours, I think, are going to be less intense. You're right. I mean, when you think about it, let's just say because the thing had a drive-through window available, if it turned into, let's just say, a coffee place, something like that, that could be open quite a few hours there. So, and I forgot to ask, but I'm not sure if there's buffer trees between the properties or fencing. I can't remember what is there fencing on there?
Fence.
Do you remember? I should have asked during that.
I think there's a fence.
Very little.
Yeah.
There's a fence that runs in between the property and 40 Beers Place, which is the residential property right behind.
Okay. So I think it should work, and as we said, and the other commissioner said, anything we can do to, soften the look of the building and make it more consistent with the existing one that's been somewhat of a landmark, at least as far back as I can remember, I think would be good to maintain that look of Stratford's Main Street, which is very important to us. So I think we should approve it. Thank you.
Any other questions or statements? Or All those in favor of Mr. Henrich's motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Passes 5-0. You want to take that up as number 5, or you want to take it up?
Well, why don't we just approve the minutes, and
Okay.
then that's the next thing down there.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the March 27, 2019 meeting.
Motion by Mr. Henrich. Do I have a second? By Mr. Vacola. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Campsite plan review, zoning enforcement.
Just bear with me for 1 second. Finish this thing here.
Sediment and erosion control applications, 540 Longbrook Avenue, remediation work.
Okay, so this is an application from the United States Army Corps of Engineers, who is going to be doing some of the remediation work over at 540 Longbrook Avenue, known to many folks here at Stratford as contract plating. Without going into a ton of detail about the remediation work that's happening, essentially they're going to be building a haul road to remove some of the material out of the site, and they're going to be a part of that site work. They're going to be constructing a sound barrier fence, as well as the haul road, and some incidental work, some stormwater management, and based on the comments that we received from the town engineer and the Stratford Health Department, who both are in support of this project, I also encourage the approval of this. Technically, the EPA is not required to make an application to the zoning commission here. We spoke with them, and they felt that it was well within their interest to make the application anyways. The only recommendations that I have, and this is really based on the recommendations from the town engineer, I state in my staff comments, it's one that if at any point the town feels that modifications need to be made to the erosion and sediment control plans, that the applicant shall comply with those recommendations. And second, per the town engineer, the removal of the erosion control shall only be completed once the site is stabilized, and such removal has been approved by the town and the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And then 3, 4, and 5 are our typical standard conditions of approval for an erosion and sediment control application. And I'd be happy to answer any questions best I could.
Mr. Henrich?
There were some other comments too, and I don't know if those are incorporated into it, but from John Casey, I believe. He talked about modification is planned to be contours north of the proposed haul road. This is the lagoon that the town on the plan would like to fill and cover. This would be done in coordination with the E&S plan for the haul road, and the E&S controls on the plan would not need to be modified for this work. Is that covered in your staff comments?
It was my intention to try to cover all his staff comments in there. Another way that we can do it is just eliminate 1 and 2, and we can say that as a condition of approval, the applicant shall follow all recommendations made by the town engineer in his email to me, April 2nd, 2019.
If you feel confident that your points 1 through 5 cover it, then I'm comfortable with that.
I believe it does.
Okay. Then I'd make a motion to approve with the following conditions as stated by our zoning administrator, points 1 through 5. I don't know that I need to necessarily read them, no, but include points 1 through 5 as conditions of that approval.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Henrich. Do I have a second? By Ms. Phillips. Any further discussion on the matter? Mr. Solhavy?
Just a couple questions really quick here. The road itself, is that even listed? Just what, and the only reason I'm really asking is because whenever anything happens down in this site, Yeah, lots of questions. I just want to make sure I'm adequately prepared to answer it. So the road that they're talking about building, is it just within the site, or does it go out to, say, Patterson Avenue, Clinton Avenue? Where's it go?
It's, if you turn to the applicant's submitted page CD 101,
Okay.
you can see the Hull Road essentially comes from, let's see, the interior site out to Longbrook Avenue.
CG001?
It's CD 101.
CD 101.
Mr. Chairman, this is the same road, I think, that was, I don't think it's a new road per se. I think this is, isn't this the same road that they were using before to remove some of the material?
I don't know what was approved in the past. To my knowledge, I know there was always been discussion about the Hall Road. That's always been a part of the plan. But I think that just in the, on the side of caution, I think that they just wanted to include that as part of their proposal.
Okay.
If it may have been approved at some point in the past, but I don't know.
I just remember voting on a proposal that included that road. It was basically dirt road, but it was used to remove material while we were doing the remediation, the early steps of cleaning out the previous company that was there and getting their material out. They used that to kind of remove that material. So I think it's sort of been there. They may be doing some more, I don't know, paving or formalizing it, but I'm pretty certain that that road, for the most part, exists in some fashion.
And I was incorrect. The page is actually CG001. It's the last page, Commissioner Salvati.
Okay.
I don't know where the previous one, Commissioner Phillips, was approved, but I know that the intent was this Hall Road that we're looking at is to be as far to the south or closest to the rail line as possible to mitigate any of the impact on the homes.
So it does not exit the site there, so the trucks will still go out to Longbrook Avenue. Am I reading that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's important to know. And the only thing is, I just hope, and just reading the discussion of this, that they're providing these hay bales and so on. There's just an awful lot of wind in that area, and with the trains and everything and the roads going through, I hope those things are going to be fairly tight so that they're not blowing all over creation.
Well, our office will be doing an inspection, and you know, what I will say is that generally we're asking these folks for permission to do things like this, and you know, they're asking us. So I share your concern, especially when we're dealing with any contaminated site and we have residential homes nearby. But I would have to rely on the training and the expertise of the engineers who've designed this, that it's...
Yeah. And I'll also rely on them to make sure that the site is secure for what they're doing. I'm sure it will be, but, you know, we don't need any more problems in town. Okay, thank you.
If not, we'll get Mr. Cotter after him. We have a motion by Mr. Henrik. Do I have a second? Mr. Salhavi, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? So moved. Planning projects, other items. We need to go into executive session with Mr. Kelly / Cotter. And who do you expect, or do you want in that, just everybody here? Okay. All the members, Mr. Habansky, and are for the purpose of pending litigation. Thank you.